if you don't want to stay here, you can use. I can shout. Yes. No. How is this? Better. Okay. So I was also an outsider to the dance world, and this was sort of my first encounter with the dance archives. And in sort of this naive way, I encountered the Laban notation, which of course, if you are in dance, this is something very familiar to people, but for me this was super exciting to see. Partly because I've been working a lot with diagram as a form of drawing. And just to show you some previous work, so the diagram, I think of it as a kind of unambiguous form of drawing that is easily reproducible and is sort of devoid of subjective emotion. And so here you see it in sort of in product design and in mapping. And so when I encountered these scores, I thought, oh, well, this is really interesting because it sort of takes the body out of the dance. So the score is as if this abstraction that really eliminates the body out of the dance. And in these drawings, which I really am surprised that they became so big, but it sort of was necessary, I think, is to put the body back into this diagram. And one method is just the scale, because then it sort of relates back to the body. And the other is that I used the material that I've really fallen in love with, which is encaustic. I'm not sure if people are familiar with it, but it's actually a wax medium, so it's produced by bees. And it's just this very sensuous material which forms a kind of skin. So it's like a skin of physicality of the body. And since it's so big, it takes a while to make these. So and every mark is sort of visible in the process. So the time becomes also put back into the diagrammatic here. And at the same time, when I was looking, so, when you look at them, it's like, you can sort of see the dance. It's an abstraction, but you can see the dance in a very abstract way, and you can sort of see the progress. And I chose, the diagrams that I chose, obviously, the notation system was used to actually notate actual performances, but what I decided to use was Albert Nust, he made these diagrams in order to teach people how to use, read, and notate. So they're very, very simple. It's like the most basic dance, the most basic use of the dance notation. And when I looked at these, I thought, oh wow, they sort of look like a machinic dance, and I actually really want someone to perform these, because it seems to me it would be like a really sort of machinic staccato kind of performance. And so the relationship to the machine, so the title of these became Teaching Dance to a Machine. And this is, again, it relates back to my work, which I've been working with this idea, and I work a lot with research, like many people do now. And actually the early modern period is very interesting to me, and I've worked with this polarity in early modernism between the machine and what this modernist myth of primitivism. So here are two robots. And these robots have been appearing in each iteration of my show for a while now. And each time they mean something different. So here, these are the machines that I think, I was just imagining them dancing the scores. And so these two polarities. So then I thought what was really interesting was that Laban, the creator of the dance notation system, was actually followed this trajectory quite interestingly, because in the 20s he was involved in this movement of like the Monte Verita movement, where dance was kind of a method to sort of go back to the body. So that, first of all, the myth of primitivism was that there is a kind of underneath culture, there is a sort of primal human that can be accessed, and that this can be done through dance. And this relates to a video that I did. And this was a commission that I got. I went, so a couple years ago I was commissioned to do a project in the anthropology archives in Basel. And that involved spending a lot of time actually in the storage rooms in the archives, and I found that extremely hard and extremely depressing. So one of the things that I decided to do objects when I was in there. The only way I could stay there for more than like 15 minutes was to sort of engage with the objects with my body, and I thought of them as a kind of a dance. So we're used to seeing these objects as these static things that we see in a museum, whereas in the original cultures they were often used in the context of performance, and they had this sort of life and agency of their own, which is completely destroyed in a way in the museum context as they appear after being brought back during colonial times. So, I mean, the videos can be seen upstairs. I'm just giving you a few stills of how these objects, I sort of interacted with them, and just the visuality of that. And trying to sort of give back a certain sense of livelihood, but at the same time not denying their captivity. And the institutional context of that. So, yeah, back to the Laban. And, people have been talking about this, like, duality of dance. So dance is this kind of like, it's this like inner sort of expression of inner joy or spontaneity or freedom, as opposed to this kind of idea with the diagrams of this like really rigid choreography, right? Of like being told how to move. And that really led me think, sorry, moving away from the microphone, sorry. That really led me to think about, opening up the idea of choreography from performance and even from dance, and just seeing it in a really basic way as the human body in space and time, and seeing it how that is organized in terms of social relations and daily life. So nationalism, and I'm not going to go into it because I think Andrea already mentioned it, and of course Laban's history is also very much involved in that. So nationalism and, for example, refugee movements, or the choreographies of war, which then generated choreography of refugee movement, which then hit the choreography of national borders, and just that whole idea of like how our bodies are choreographed in terms of social structures, and that really interested me. And I didn't really have time to engage as much in that at this point, but this is also interesting because obviously the idea, I was so interested in this myth of primitivism. Of course, there were never any primitives, there were only primitivists. And these are some of them, and obviously in the German context, this is like sun worshipping, so it's like Teutonic mythologies, and that became part of a fascist ideology later. But also nudity, dancing in nature, and this idea of this like freedom of movement, and also of therapy somehow, that you can take away the strictures, those strictures that make our bodies move in a certain way, and then move freely, and somehow that's a therapeutic. It helps us free our minds as well. So that's one pole of it. And then, what really interested me, and I'm skipping all the political stuff where Laban was involved in the 1936 Olympics, but then moving on to when he was exiled. The Nazis in the end decided he's not quite appropriate and threw him out. And he ended up in England. And just let me get that because it's a great phrase. I want to make sure I have it. He developed something called industrial rhythm. And so this is basically choreography of factory work. And what's interesting is in the 40s, the men went off to war, and like women had to do factory work. And Laman did these classes for factory workers. I mean, it is easy to make fun of this, but there's these stories where there's this two women had to hoist this incredibly heavy tire, and then Laban comes along and they take these classes, and suddenly he's like, oh well, you can use the momentum and swing it, and suddenly one woman can do the tire, and it's great, and so very really happy. So anyway, but this is the two poles of like the dance is like open, like something that like comes from the inside and is very personal, or this joy of living, like it has this like connection to this irrationality in a way of our desire to watch dance and to dance. There's no particular reason to do this. And in that sense, I think it connects to drawing, which is also kind of an irrational, the opposite of a diagram. There's a kind of, in art drawing, there's this like idea of, well, there's no reason to do it, but we like it. So, and then there's the opposite of like, the body as a machine. the body becomes part of a machine in industrial production. And I think in my drawings, I try to sort of bring this out, this kind of duality. And since I do work a lot with archives, like a lot of people do now, but like again, a lot of people are not so much interested in the past, only in terms of either the present or, for me, I've become really obsessed in a weird way about like futurology and the very strange stuff going on. And I'm going to show you this really bizarre graph. And it's by a futurologist called Ray Kurzweil. And the book is entitled The Singularity is Near. And basically, the subtitle is When Humans Transcend Biology. And it's, for me, this is like an amazing example of techno-capitalism. Because if you see, computer power, and then there's the evolution. So you sort of evolve, the computer power evolves from a bacterium to a worm, to a spider, lizard, mouse, monkey, human, and then, like, soon we're going to hit post-human, right? So basically the machine is going to take over. And his whole idea is that, okay, we have evolution, we have biology, but that's really slow and inefficient. It took like thousands of years for us to evolve. But then capitalism comes along, and it speeds the process up. And now, since we're hitting the technological age, and if you see the, he really talks about what's called, so it's not a progression, it's a, what's it called? It's a compound progression. And basically compound progression, you have a smooth curve and then suddenly it goes whack and it just takes off, like compound interest, for example. And their whole thing is that, oh, that's about to happen. So the machine, because of like developments in neuroscience and nanotechnology, and all of this is coming together, and we're about to hit that moment where the machine can self-generate. So basically this super intelligent machine where all the computers are going to merge, and it's going to, we will become extinct, essentially. Not because the environment's going to go, but because the machines are taking over. And basically what's really funny is that, you know, these people that like really, really believe it's imminent, and they are taking a lot of vitamins and exercising and stuff because they want to live long enough so that they can upload their brain into the machine. And it's not, I mean, you know, this seems really kooky, but it's like TED Talks, you know, lots of TED Talks about this and stuff. So it's actually a relatively mainstream thing. You know, and it's fascinating, again, but it's, you know, and I'm still plowing through the book because it actually does condense a lot of research that by now is already 10 years old, but so it is very scientifically grounded in a way. So basically the question for me becomes, yeah, and of course there's no quite like, they don't think about the financial aspect, the social aspect, it's just pure like rah, techno, you know, technology is wonderful and it's going to be great and, you know, all human problems will be solved. But what is interesting to me is like, okay, so if you think of the brain as this physical object that you can actually upload, you know, if you can duplicate the brain exactly and physically upload it, they say, oh, well, then you will be that. You will be that you will continue in that object. So the question really becomes, and I think it's a very contested moment of like, where does matter end and where does something else begin? So are we just physical objects? You know, are we just purely physical objects that somehow magically create the consciousness and the sense of self? And maybe, you know, that which dances. So the question for me is like, what dances? Who is dancing? Are we dancing machines? You know, or is this something else inside? So yeah, this kind of, so that's basically what these diagrams are trying to bring out, and I think it's a long process that will continue. And in my next sort of step in the work, I'm really looking at the interface between that, the biology that we still, you know, we are, and the technological, and that kind of interface. And I'm thinking of doing drawings with the rainforest, so like diagramming the rainforest. And what's really interesting for me is like, if there is this computer and it's purely rational, how do we as artists or as cultural producers teach the computer about the irrational? And that's sort of a question that I have that I'm posing. That's it.
thank you very much for your a little bit irritating prognosis.
I'm just a messenger.
I know this futurologist, but yes, this is one side in a way of the. But the interesting thing is, especially in dance, in archives, concerning the body, concerning art, to bring it together. Art production with science,
which is something that a lot of people
and scientific perception, because over the history, how body has been read or seen had huge impact on the perception of art production as well. So, but we talked before at lunchtime that there is a chance, opportunity to take agency within this discourse in art production. Could you maybe describe this?
Right, and I've shown the depressing aspect of it, but there are theorists who are amazing, like Karen Barat. I think she's a very, a super interesting theorist who's actually looking at all the scientific advancements of like the past century, really, and thinking about it in social terms, and thinking about it in terms of agency. And how we can create, first of all, that in a way science is progressing so fast that culture is lagging, and that maybe we're lagging as much as 100 years by now, and that we really need to catch up, because otherwise something will happen that we have no control over. And I think the future is really being contested in a very, very strong way. It's like a very contested territory, and it's really important to start thinking about, okay, what does this mean, and how can we relate to it? And I think art, really can serve as this like podium or translation mechanism for that. So, and obviously theory as well. I really encourage amazing book, Karen Barat. And also this is another aspect which is also perhaps tangential, but also the interest in meditation. I don't think it's a coincidence that that's happening now. And the interest in, because physicality is being contested, like the idea of the border between what matter is and what is not matter, and where does matter come from? Where does, so for example at CERN, the whole thing, the Higgs boson thing is that fascinating stuff, but it's actually, they found the particle that allows mass to happen, which is just amazing. It's like out of nothing, this particle allows mass to happen. Of course, I don't understand at all what that means, but it's really, it's obviously just mind-boggling. So,
just to give you an idea of Karen Barat, it's the book Agenzieller Realismus, and the interesting thing is Karen Barat has been physician, and she bases her theory on the fact that she wants the apparatus to be part of the discourse on her knowledge on history in physics, and now she followed Donna Haraway on her chair, and her first wish is that science and art might lead to a better world, in a way. Yeah, and that's really very impressive.
Take it away from these people.
Yeah, and I think all three artistic positions and artworks that we and speeches that we could have taken part today showed us that the body and the language and are agency. They open up realms and spaces and opportunities to change the world in the end. Yeah, and the perception. Yeah. So, do we still have time to make a round and to open the questions? Yeah.
I want to thank the three artists so much, because you are very specific and very political in a philosophical sense agents, and you make the archive performative, and this is, I want you to thank you for that.
Thank you for letting us do it.
Question? But if you don't mind to do the mic because we are recording, and someone, otherwise we have to.
We have to.
Yes, thanks also